We're going to take about 10 minutes to just get some information about your early years and influences.
You can just do it any way you want to do it.
All righty.
Just like you plan.
Okay.
All right.
So
Let's have it.
So what was your name at birth, please?
Della Reese Patricia Early was my name at birth.
Okay. And when were you born?
1931, July the 6th.
And where were you
Detroit, Michigan.
born? And where did you grow up?
Detroit, Michigan.
Okay. And what was your father's name?
Richard Thad Early.
And what did he do for a living?
He poured steel, literally poured steel.
Okay. And how about your mother's name?
Nellie Early.
Okay. And what did she do?
She was a cook. She was a house cleaner. She was a floor scrubber. She was my father's helpmeet.
Okay. And what traits do you think that you've inherited from your parents?
Oh, my goodness. My father gave me a work ethic. I saw him go to work every day in the snow, with a cold, with a backache, with a stomach ache. He went to work anyway. So he gave me an understanding about keeping my work appointments. My mother was very spiritual. She was a personal friend of God. And so we had an understanding that he was the head of the house, and I still feel that he's the head of the house. And I still feel that the things that I saw her do and the way that I saw her live was very important, and it is a part of my life. I may not be able to describe it for you, but I know it's in there.
And if we could just go back for a second, the origin of your name, where did that come from?
My mother. Where'd your name come from?
Was there a particular reason that she named you what she named you? Did she have
I think it's because she liked it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And did you have any siblings?
I had 5 sisters and a brother, but they were all grown except for my brother and adults when I was born. My oldest sister was 20 when I was born, and count down 2 years at a time, down to my brother and I. We were 3 years apart.
Okay. And what were some of your hobbies growing up?
Oh, I don't know, hobbies. I had to work. My mother had things to do, and I had to do that. My mother wanted me to finish school because none of her children had ever finished school. So my main thrust was to finish school. But I had duties when I came home. The bathroom was mine to clean. The dinner dishes were mine to take care of. If she had other work, if she was ironing, she took in washing and ironing. If she was ironing, my evening might be spent folding the clothes or ironing something or sprinkling them and rolling them so that they would be ready for her to iron when she was ready.
Okay.
So I didn't have hobbies. They were not my hobbies, but I had full days. I had things to do, constructive things to do.
Did you have a sense of what you wanted to be when you grew up?
I always was what I wanted to be. My mother says that when I was born and they slapped me, I didn't cough. She said I began to sing, and I never stopped. So.
And so, as you just mentioned, you started singing at a very early age. You ended up going on tour with gospel singer Mahalia Jackson.
But I had a whole career before Mahalia Jackson. When I was 6 years old, I sang until people were nervous. I sang continuously, and not knowing songs per se, I sang whatever came in my mind. I sang that, and I might sing that for 20 minutes and set people to go crazy. And so one day she swooped me up, my mother, and took me to the church, and there were 2 magnificent men there pastoring the church. And they knew that children didn't know what you were talking about in the 11 o'clock service. He knew that the rituals didn't mean anything to the children. That's why we were so nervous in the seats and eat or else sleep. And so he decided that he would have a young people's church. And the men who were there who were studying to be ministers became our ministers. And we had a regular Sunday service, but on our level. How can I say that to you? Instead of it being so psychological, it was fairy tale-ish. That's what I'm trying to say. It was put down so that we could understand it. And the young men who were studying to be ministers, it gave them several approaches to their studies because they had to break it down so that we could understand it. So that helped them out too. And I was able to remember the lyric and stay on pitch. And so I became the directress of the young people's choir. And every fifth Sunday, we could sing in the big church. And I made sure that every fifth Sunday, what we sang was something I had a solo in. And so I created between 7 and 13, which is when Mahalia came into my life. I created an audience, and I was a star at my church.
Okay. And so how did the meeting with her come about?
A lady came who was pregnant, and she was a very healthy lady, and nobody knew she was pregnant. And we didn't have air conditioning at that time. We had the funeral homes gave the churches fans, and this was a very hot day in July, and there was no breeze blowing or anything, and the lady fainted, and they took her to the pastor's study, and there happened to be a doctor there in the audience, and he was a member of the church, and he came forward and discovered that the lady was pregnant. And her husband told Mahalia, who had, I think, 3 engagements in the South, that he would not allow his wife pregnant to go into the South because at that time black people were not welcome into hospitals, and many people had died because there was no space for them. There was nobody to take care of them. And he said he wanted his child to live and his wife too, and so she could not go. And so the ministers asked my mother if I could go. At that time I was a lyric soprano, and so was this lady. And they asked my mother if I could go and do those 3 jobs with Mahalia. And my mother allowed me to go.
Mm-hmm. So talk about the experience of being on tour with her at such a young age.
Mahalia was magnificent. I didn't particularly like her because she didn't let me do what I wanted to. I thought when I got away from my mother on the road, I'd be able to, get down and break it loose and do all the stuff that she wouldn't let me do. And Mahalia was stricter than my mother was. But see, some things are just difficult to put into simple sentences. It was a different experience because I was with different people. I was doing different things. But it was not an astounding, marvelous, what I've been dreaming of situation. It gave me a chance to learn the art of communication. That's the best I got out of it, because Mahalia Jackson was a communicator beyond any description, and I learned from her. And so in that respect, it was a wonderful experience.
And how old were you at that time?
13.
Okay. And where did you go to high school?
In Detroit.
Okay. And what did you do after you graduated from high school?
I did 2 years. Sounds like a jail. I don't mean it like that. I went 2 years to Wayne University, and my mother died, and my father could not afford to keep me in college. And because my mother, as I said to you earlier, was his helpmeet, and that meant that half of what we had was gone. And so there was no money for me to finish college.
What were you studying when you were
I wanted to be a psychiatrist, but I had to go through medicine first. And it meant what I wanted was going to take me 12 years, and there was not 12 years of money to do that.
Mm-hmm. So then how did you end up deciding to pursue a professional music career?
Hunger.
And can you tell me a little bit about that
Hunger?
decision?
You don't know anything about hunger? That's when you haven't had anything to eat, and you don't have any money, and you don't have any place to stay, and that, it's not like 3 meals a day. It's a kind of very depressing period. And the only thing I knew how to do, really knew how to do, was to sing. I had no credentials, so I drove a taxi for a while. I drove a vegetable truck for a while. I was a dental assistant, secretary type, none of the medical work, but answer the phones and type the letters and send out the bills and things. And that kept me going, and I would sing at night.
And then when did you decide to make the move to New York to pursue music further?
They said if you could make it in New York, you could make it anywhere. And I said, well, let me go and see if I can make it in New York. Really is how. I got there I started in what I called a scootmobile. It wasn't really an automobile, but it would get me from place to place. I could go so far. I could go from Detroit to Cleveland. And then I'd be in Cleveland for maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And then I could go from Cleveland to Pittsburgh. And I could be there 2, 3 weeks. And then I could go from Pittsburgh to Harrisburg. And that's the way I got to New York. I worked my way in my little scootmobile.
So who were some of the singers and musicians you worked with in New York?
Well, I worked with some singers that were really more important to my life. Before I got to New York, I had the opportunity to work with Ella and Sarah and Dinah and Billy Eckstein and Miles Davis and Erskine Hawkins and his band and Duke Ellington. And so I did that by working in a place called the Flame Show Bar, which was in my hometown. And I was the opening act, and so I got to be on stage with all of these people.
Can you talk about getting to work with Nat King Cole?
I was in love with Nat King Cole. And I didn't care who knew it, his wife, his mama. I didn't care. I was just in love with him. And my first tour, big tour, was with Nat Cole because Erskine Hawkins' orchestra played for him. And I was the vocalist with Erskine Hawkins' orchestra. And I was so smitten with him that I would stand, I opened the show. And I would rush upstairs and change my clothes and come back and hide in the curtains so that I could watch him. And I studied him. And one of the biggest thrills of my life was that the band started teasing me about him and how I felt about him. And, they razzed me really good. And one night when the show was over, he closed the show and the show curtains closed. He made an announcement to the band that they should have more respect for me because I was learning, I was putting my act together, and he was going to do everything he could to help me. And he didn't want to hear anybody laughing at me anymore. Well, goodness gracious, all up in heaven. All up. I just floated around for about a month. I just never put my feet on the ground because he had defended me, and he had I didn't even know I knew I was standing in the curtains. He had recognized me. It was wonderful.
So, in the early part of your career, can you talk a little bit about any experience you had with racism in the industry?
I was born black. What do you mean? I'm not going to let you do me like this. My experience was I was born an Afro-American. My mother was Cherokee. My father was an Afro-American gentleman. And so I was born into the circumstances of being black in 1931. And all the conditions available were different from the way they are since you've been born. And so I went through all of the things that one had to go through at that time to simply survive.
When did you land your first recording contract?
I don't remember the year, but I was working at this place I was telling you about, the Flame Show Bar. And the manager of the Flame Show Bar really liked what I was doing. And so he had a friend in New York. His name was Lee Maggot. And he kept saying to Lee Maggot that he ought to come to Detroit and see me. And eventually Lee Maggot came to see me. And he said to me, he watched 2 nights shows. We did 3 shows a night. He watched for 2 nights. And at the end of the second night, he said, if you ever happen to be in New York, call me. And so I went home that night and packed my bag and went to New York and called him.
And what was it like to have your first hit with In the Still of the Night?
Well, it was a lot of things before the hit. You see, he was young, Lee Maggot. He was young, and he was trying to make it. And I was young, and I was trying to make it. And we were in New York with no money whatsoever. He did have a marvelous singer who used to sing with Duke Ellington named Al Hibbler. And Al was working more than any of us, he or I. And so his commission from Al Hibbler, he would share with me so that I could have a bed to sleep in and some food to eat. And for a couple of years, I would work Long Island one-nighters or weekends or something like that to survive. Survival was what it was about. And then Lee Maggot got a man named Jerry Blaine to come and hear me. And Jerry Blaine came to hear me, and he owned a recording company, Jubilee Recording Company. And he wanted to record me, and he did record me. And In the Still of the Night, as you said, was my first recording, and it frightened me. I went home, I recorded, and I went back to Detroit. And it frightened me because one day I was walking down the street, and I heard my voice coming out of these doorways, and I had never heard that before. And I remember it. I stood by, once I got over being startled, it didn't frighten me, it startled me. I didn't expect to hear it. I stood by the door and laid my face on the glass so I could hear it. And then I waited to hear what the people said about it. And they had said they liked it. And it was, I don't have a word for it, but it was really good. Yeah.
Do you remember the first time that you saw television?
First time I saw television? Yes. Erskine Hawkins was staying at the Teresa Hotel in Harlem, and in his room there was a television, and I saw it there. I was fascinated by it. But I didn't have one. There was not one in the room I was staying in. He was the star, and he had the star's room, and so he had the television. So every chance I got, I would go up and watch.
Do you remember any of the shows that you would watch at that time?
Jackie Gleason was a favorite of mine, and Sid Caesar was a favorite of mine. Those are the only 2 I can remember that really were, you rushed to. Ed Sullivan was a favorite of mine, but that was farther up in my career. But Jackie Gleason and Sid Caesar and Ed Sullivan were shows that you went home to see. Everybody gathered. If I had a television in my house, 3 or 4 families used my television for those Sunday evening shows, Saturday night shows.
What was your first appearance on television?
Soupy Sales gave me a shot on television while I was working at the Flame Show Bar. He had a midnight show, sort of forerunner to the Tonight Show. The format was that. And he was one of the first people who had that format. And so I would do my set at the Flame, and then I'd go over and do something on his show. And he had me over like 2-3 times a week.
You were talking about Ed Sullivan. You actually ended up appearing on Ed Sullivan.
Yes, I was 18 times in 1 year.
Wow. Do you remember your first meeting with Ed Sullivan?
Well, you didn't meet with Mr. Sullivan. You did his show. We didn't all become personal friends because I was doing his show. I was there. There was somebody to take care of me. There was a band rehearsal, and he would come out and say hello to everybody and the likes of that. You know, he was very courteous, but it wasn't like we were running buddies or anything like that. My break with Mr. Sullivan was that his wife and he had a love song, and it was the Autumn Concerto. And I had just recorded a song that was an adaptation of the Autumn Concerto, and it was called And That Reminds Me. And so every time he felt like he wanted to make love, I guess, to his wife, he'd have me on the show, and I'd sing And That Reminds Me. And so that particular year, he wanted 18 times, and so I was on 18 times. I guess that's what happened. However you take it, that's the way it went down.
Do you remember who were some of the other acts that appeared on the show?
Oh, everybody was on Ed. You had to be on Ed Sullivan's show. That later dropped down to Johnny Carson's show. If you wanted to make it, you had to be on Ed Sullivan's show to get jobs across the world. On your resume, you would say, she was on the Ed Sullivan show. And so the owner of the club would then feel that you would draw people because everybody watched the Ed Sullivan show. So everybody was on. The Beatles was on. Elvis was on. He made Elvis not move and had him shoot him from the waist up because that was lewd what he was doing with his legs. I never understood why, but that was considered. But this was all before you were born, so it wouldn't impress you now, but it was very important to us.
Did you ever interact with Ed Sullivan on the show?
No, you interact. No, he would say, "Hello, Della." He would say, "That's good. That was good, Della. I enjoyed that, Della." But he was not. Didn't interact. He was not. He was the host of the show, and he allowed everybody to do what they did.
Do you remember your last appearance on the show, and did you know that it would be the last time that you'd be on his show?
No.
The 18th time?
No, but that wasn't the last time. That was just 18 times in a year. I must have done his show for 5 or 6 years, but not as frequently as that first year.
Mm-hmm. So you were talking a little bit about, you had to have Ed Sullivan,
Yes, the young people, you should have seen some of Johnny Carson. You had to be on Johnny Carson's show because then that would be on your resume and people then would accept you as being a recognized professional because you had done Johnny Carson's show.
Mm-hmm. So how do you think the exposure of being on Ed Sullivan helped your career overall?
Tremendously. Okay.
So going into the 1960s, you kind of made the rounds of the talk show, variety show circuit. What were some of your most memorable experiences on those shows?
Well, there were a lot of shows in the 60s. Andy Williams had a show. Dino had a show. There were so many, I can't even call them back to mind. Perry Como had a show. Steve Allen had a show. And they were musical shows, musically based. They had comedy also, but they were musically based. So I was on all of them on a regular basis. That became my second line of work.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk about how you met Merv Griffin?
I was working in New York, and Merv was doing a radio show. And at that time, Count Basie, had written a song that had a really marvelous groove to it, just was wonderful. And everybody that announced something had this song in the background because it was an uplifting thing. Commercials had it, people who had radio shows had it, and so did Merv. And so Merv and I Merv began to sing the weather report to the groove of this bassy number. And I began to sing the weather report also. And so we just really had a marvelous time. It was written on the cue cards or the, so that you could see it. So we just began to sing it. I don't know why we did that, but we did. We began to sing it. And after that, we did, he had some kind of an affair that he was raising money for. And after the radio show, I went with him to that affair where I met his wife-to-be. And then he got this television show. And at that time, if you had a hit record, you could sing. If you were black, you could sing on the show. But nobody ever invited you over to sit down and talk. They would open the curtains, you would sing, they would close the curtains, and the master of ceremonies would start some other conversation and move on to the next thing. Well, having done this song of the weather report with Merv and having spent that day with him, he knew that I could carry on a conversation. And so he broke the barrier. And he invited me to come over and sit down on the couch. And it was, he said, one of his best shows because we clowned, we sang, we laughed, and that made it possible for the other people to say, come on over and sit down, because they found out I had some comedic talent and that I could hold my place with whoever was there. So Merv made a big, important stance in my life.
How frequently did you do his show? Do you remember?
Oh, anytime he called me.
Yeah.
I didn't keep a list, but it was good. I was here. I was available. So if somebody didn't make it, I've had this wonderfulness. I have it now with Larry King. If somebody doesn't make it and they need somebody in a hurry, they'll call me. Merv was that way. Johnny Carson was that way. If they needed somebody to fill the spot, they would call me and I would go.
So talking about some of these shows in the 60s, you also did a game show, Hollywood Squares.
Yes,
and
I did. I did do that.
Can you talk about being on that show?
That was a good show. It was the first time that I had been on a show like that. It started with Hedda Hopper, the first one I did, and I want to call this man's name. He wrote a song, he took a classic and wrote a camp theme on it. Hello, Mama. Hello. Alan Sherman was on the show. And Alan Sherman took a masculine approach as to women staying in their places, being barefoot and in the kitchen. And he said something to the effect that women aren't needed. And I said to him, well, one woman wasn't needed because she gave birth to you, and we really didn't need that. Well, Hedda Hopper started laughing and laughed, so we had to take a break from the shooting. And she wrote it up in her column. And it just got such press that they kept, Marshall was his name, the host of Hollywood Squares when I was there. They kept calling me back on that same kind of a premise, and so I did that a lot.
How did you feel about doing a game show? I mean, compared to the other shows.
I like a variety of things. I get bored very easily, and so the more things that are available for me to do, the better I like it.
In 1968, you got a role on the Mod Squad.
Yes.
And do you remember what the role was and how that all came about?
Well, at that time, the general premise was that the star had a hangout place. And in this place was a lady that he trusted, he could get his messages from. He would go there for a drink after work, that kind of a place. And that was my first job with them. I owned this jazz room that they came into when they were off work. But I did several of those too. I did it They went into ice houses. That's what they were called. And I played that lady several times.
Was that the point, do you think, where you started to make a transition from singing into acting?
Oh, I see what you're... I was sitting in a Howard Johnson in the wintertime on a road, not even in town, on a road. And I turned on the television, and this person who will be nameless was singing, and it was like somebody was hitting me. I kept... that kind gave me that kind of a... Thinking about it don't make me feel good right now, but gave me a really feeling. And when she finished, they talked about what a marvelous actress she was and how they could hear her acting ability in the song and how she delivered the song. And I'm sitting there, I'm getting so mad, I don't know what to do. I don't know why she should even be in the business, period. And I began to think about it, you know. Was that why she was there? Because she was an actress, because she surely wasn't a singer. And out there on the road, I thought about that. And then it just like this, it occurred to me that when I was singing, I was already acting. Because every time I sang the blues, I wasn't blue. But I had to act like I was blue so the audience would get that feeling. And when I sang how happy I wasn't always that happy, but I had to act like that. And that was the door opener for me. I began to look for things to do that had drama in them, in my music and in the acting field.
We talked about Merv Griffin. How about the Mike Douglas show?
Mike was wonderful. Mike was another person who tore down the barriers. Mike would have a co-host or hostess every week. And usually it was, you know, the same thing. You could come on and sing, but you couldn't co-host. And so he and I talked in the dressing room one day, and we laughed. And I told him a few jokes, and we had a good time getting made up for me to sing on his show. And he invited me back to be a co-host.
And can you talk about the Della Reese show it was 1969 to 70? How did the show come about?
The man who was directing Mike Douglas's show left Mike Douglas's show. I don't know why. And I was working in Chicago on stage in a nightclub, and he came in. His name, Woody Frazier is his name. He came in to see the show. And in my show, I talk some, and I tell a few jokes, and I sing some. And when it was over, he came backstage and he congratulated me. But he's a real a person who plays in kids. He's about 7 years old. And so he said, how would you like to do a television show? I said, I'd love it. He said, good, we'll do one. I said, wonderful, call me when you're ready. That was the whole conversation. He went his way and I went my way. 3 weeks later, he knocked on my door with a director, a set designer, and he said, are you ready to do the show? And I said, if you're ready, I'm ready.
What markets was it shown in, do you remember? It
was shown everywhere except Chicago. It was shown in New York, too. And the eastern states, Connecticut, but they were very surprised because they thought that it would not sell. I had a mixed orchestra. I had Caucasians and Latin people in the orchestra, and I was an Afro-American woman, and so they thought it would not sell in the South, but in Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia, we had our biggest audiences.
Do you have any memorable guests, any favorites?
Oh, yes. I have a wall full of them upstairs. Muhammad Ali, I just looked at him the other day when I came through the hall. He was there. Carmen was there. Sarah was there. Sammy Davis was there. Duke was there. Ethel Waters was there. So many people, because we did 292 shows, and we had 2 or 3 people on each one of the shows. The young singers who were coming up were on the show. We had Louis Prima was on the show. We had animals. We had people with gadgets, and it was a very interesting format.
Was there anyone that you can remember that was up and coming, like you were saying, that did your show maybe first and then hit big?
I don't know that I'm responsible for anybody's success, but the door was always open to people who had talent. My door is always open to people who have talent.
Was the civil rights movement reflected in the show in any way?
Reflected in the show? I don't think so, because we, as I just said to you, we had mixed people there. It was not reflected in the people of the show, but it was still going on around us. We should get to this civil rights thing, because you want to hear about this. It was impossible to live a normal, correct life, because there were so many people who had no respect for black people, who thought that we were a minor race, that we were stupid, we were lazy, we were sloven, and they reacted to us in that way. It made no difference that these things were not true necessarily any more than in any other race, but that was the brand that we were carrying. And so we had to suffer the things that people did to us that were not things that people should do to you. I have not had many trying experiences, because nobody does that to me. I don't care what your ethnic background is or your opinion is. There's only so much that you can do to me. There's ever only been so much that you will do, and then I have a need to react.
And do you remember how the show ended? Your show.
One day he came and he said, the reason, I should give you the reason. Woody had signed on to spend X amount of dollars. I don't know what those dollars were. But we had an orchestra, full orchestra, 16 pieces. We had guests that cost money. And the money that he had allotted was not enough. And so every show, we were $10,000, $12,000 over. $10,000, $12,000 over every time we do a show runs the budget up too high. And we were dealing with a tire manufacturer. And he knew that if you poured a certain amount of rubber, you would get X amount of tires, and you could get X amount of dollars from that. He could not understand that this was not that kind of business, that this was, the budget was going to change depending who we had on the show. He could not deal with that. He just knew that he could put the money in rubber, and he would make X amount of tires or whatever they make out of rubber, and he would then have a refund that he wanted. And so eventually our overruns got to be too much. And they wanted then to cut the show down. They wanted to take out the orchestra. They didn't want to have an audience. They just wanted to tear the show down. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. So if it's time for it to be over, let it be over.
In your book, you talk a little bit about the show not selling because you were a black woman. What was the climate like?
Well, it was like this. The man who was selling our show said he couldn't sell our show because my gums were black. My silent in here now. That was his rationale. He never tried to sell the show. He didn't want the show to go. And his reason for not being able to sell it was that my gums were not pink. He said they were black. They're blue, but he said they were black. And he couldn't, because of that, every time I smiled, I turned people off.
Did you have a reaction to him?
You don't want me to say that on your show.
Do you feel that doing that show helped pave the way for other women in television?
I've been blessed that I haven't had to make the money that the other people made, but I've been blessed that I opened the doors so people could get in, and I'm very thankful that they got in and did so well.
You talked a little bit about The Tonight Show and Johnny Carson before. Do you remember the first time that you appeared on The Tonight Show?
Well, it was my first hit record. That's when I appeared. That's how you got to Johnny Carson's show.
Did you meet Johnny at that time?
Yes, I met him. I don't even remember what year that was, but whatever record was a hit at that time, I went on his show to do that record.
And then he approached you about being a guest host on the show.
Yes. Yeah.
And how did that...
I was doing Della, my show, and he, bless him, he loved his audience, and he did not want to just stick somebody in there. He wanted somebody that he felt would entertain his audience as he had entertained them all those 30 years. And so he started interviewing or selecting people. And I was working in the same studio he was working in Burbank. They're about to tear it down now, but I was working, my show was on this side and his was on that side. And one day in the hallway we passed each other, and he said, "How'd you like to try out hosting?" And I said, "I'd love it." And he invited me. I was the first woman of color to do that. I think I was the first woman to do that.
But how did you feel when he approached you about it? Were you nervous? Or
I felt good.
Yeah.
You feel good when you succeed. You feel good. You know, when people appreciate you, you feel good. You feel it's worthwhile. You feel you're glad you're there getting that.
Any nervousness about preparing to go and do this?
I don't know when
show?
the last time I was nervous about my craft. I don't know that I was ever nervous. I'm concerned about the lyric. I'm concerned about the words, and I'm on the way to it. I'm thinking about that. But once I step into that zone, I don't even think about that anymore.
Also in the 70s, you started doing some work on shows like Policewoman, Medical Center. Mm-hmm. What types of roles were you being offered on those shows?
I was a nurse on Medical Center. I was a policewoman on I came to the script. That's how I can say that. Whatever the script was, I came to the script. They decided that part was a part that they thought I could play. And so I came to the script, which was coming to the lyric without the music for me.
In 1975, you played yourself on Sanford and Son, in an episode of Sanford and Son. How did that come about?
Red was my friend for 40 years. A good friend, not just somebody I knew. We were hungry together.
Yeah. How did you meet him originally?
In a club in Chicago 84 years ago. You know, we were all in there to see somebody, I don't know who, and we're enjoying it, and just how you meet somebody in a club.
So you had a personal relationship with him?
He was my friend for 40 years.
And then how was it to work with him on a show?
He
like
was
that?
my friend. I'm not going to play with you if you keep doing this.
So that was your first sitcom then, Sanford and Son?
No.
Okay. Were there others? What was it?
Oh, those that the Policewoman was a sitcom.
Policewoman was actually a drama.
But the role that I played this cop that was more home-friendly, homely, home-bodied than the average staunch cop. I didn't have to.
So you felt you were doing comedy already?
It was that was the salt to the thing. This little comedic moment, so that it wouldn't be all dark and dire. Mm-hmm. But there were well, those were musicals. Doing like Dean's show. You did comedy. It was a musical show, but you did comedy, and bits and pieces of comedy. Carson's show was bits and pieces of comedy. I sang something, but then I came to the couch and the comedy. It's an interwoven thing to keep it from being so blah. You add a little salt to it.
How about joining the cast of Chico and the Man?
I loved it.
Yeah.
That was a wonderful cast. He was so fresh and so energetic. And Jack was, there's no words for Jack for an entertainer. Jack remembered the first joke he ever told. He remembered the first situation comedy he was ever in. If we were lost for something to say, he knew the right words to say. He wasn't writing the show. He was the star of the show. But he had so much in here. He had been an entertainer so long that he had an answer for almost everything. He danced well. He and Satchmo, not Satchmo, marvelous comedian. I'm going to tell you his name before it's over.
Scatman?
Scatman. He played mandolin, and he and Jack would do an act with him playing the mandolin and them telling jokes, and the comedy, not written, you know. He would strum something, and Jack would say, that reminds me of when Sam and Joe did, and they're off. That just that much, and they'd be off. And they would entertain us on the rewrite days and the days when it took too long to get the script. And so it was all fun and games. It was wonderful. And Freddie was magnificent. He was a natural comedian.
So you came into that show. It had already been on the air a few years.
Yes.
So can you describe the character that you played in this circumstances?
I had a roach coach. Meal on Wheels, where come and cook for the people who are working. And I owned the land that Jack's garage was standing on. And so that's how I was in contact with him, getting my rent, telling him he couldn't park this here and he couldn't.
We were talking about Freddie Prinze. Oh, I'm sorry, the character that you were playing.
I had someone to drive the coach, so I was on the premise a lot. And Jack did things that were not in his lease. And that's how we had this back and forth going. He put cans out where they shouldn't be. He knew they shouldn't be there, but his character was, whatever I'm not supposed to do, I'm going to do that. And so we had this between us all the time. And then Freddie, somehow or another, not written, came like I was his mother. He began to, on the set, act like that, like I was his guardian or his mother or something. And whoever was writing said, let's put that in. And so that became my relationship with him. When Jack got on his nerves, he would come across the alley and talk to me, and we'd figure out something. So I became an intricate part of it.
Do you have any favorite episodes that you can think of?
Not really. It's been so long ago, and I've done so many things since then. I don't have any. Not really, no.
How long did you have to learn the script for a show, for Chico and the Man?
Well, we started on Monday and we shot on Friday evening.
And did you tape in front of a live audience?
Yes, 2.
In your book, you talk a little bit about Freddie being a prankster
on
the set.
He was.
Always?
Always.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Every day he had something.
Do you have any stories?
He would hit the wall. And the wall would crumble because the walls in studios are not put up for a house to live in forever. So we would come in, there'd be a hole in the wall. Or he took martial arts. So we would come in and he would be jumping from table to table, or whatever his lesson was in martial arts, he would be doing that. Or he would bring something that had no business there, a raccoon, and turn it loose in the you know, just he was a little boy. He really was. What happened was he had too much too soon. He was just reached in the barrio, picked him up, and put him in the president's Oval Office, and there was no time to learn to expand.
Did you ever feel any tension between him and the producers or the directors of the show?
No, everybody knew him to be what he was, a little boy, and so they really treated him that way, which I'm not sure was the right thing to do, because it encouraged him to continue to do that. But you couldn't help but love him. He had such charisma.
How did you learn that he had died?
I was in Cleveland. Yes, I was in Cleveland, and my daughter's nanny called me and told me that what had happened, and I came home immediately so I could be here.
How did the rest of the cast and the crew take his death?
It was overwhelming. It was something you never expected at all. You know, he had so much to live for, and it was a mistake. He didn't intend to do that. It was just another one of the things, clowning, that he did. Things he liked for you to go, that this turned him on if he could make you do that. And that was another time, only this time it was terrible.
How did the show try to go on without him? How did they
Well, they
explain
got
it?
another little boy, and they brought him from, supposedly in the script, his mother couldn't get out of Mexico, but she had put him across the border or something. And somebody had told Jack about him, and Jack had accepted him to take care of him till his mother could get across the border, or somebody from his family could get across the border. But the audience didn't. They wanted Freddie. They didn't want... There was something between Freddie and Jack. You know, something... Jack could give vent to that old man rage that he did so well. And Freddie had a great reactions for that.
So did you feel that just being on the set was so much different without Freddie?
It was different. The show was different. The scripts were different, because now we were dealing with a young man, a young boy, 9, 10, 11 years old, something like that. So the jokes had to be different. They couldn't be the jokes that could be for Freddie, who was a man talking to a man. And so it was entirely different. And the public did not accept it that way.
How did you find out that they were going to cancel the show?
Like you find out, they say,
You're
we're
done.
canceling the show.
Were you surprised at that point?
Not really, because it wasn't the same. It wasn't the same.
How did the show end?
I don't even remember.
And then let's talk a little bit about Welcome Back, Kotter, which you did from 78 to 79.
Well, Welcome Back, Kotter was produced by Jimmy Comack, who also produced Chico and the Man and several other shows. And so you need somebody, but we're back to that. Somebody didn't show, step in here, Dell, and do this. And we were all in the same building.
So you stepped in for Gabe
Several
Kaplan.
times. Not for Gabe, not necessarily. See, there are other characters, too. You have to have somebody, you have to have the lead, then you have to have somebody that works with the lead regularly, then you have to have other people for the lead to react to. And Travolta was young. He was a part of the young group of people. There was school involved, so I was a teacher several times. I was a substitute teacher. I was the school nurse one time. Parts that had to be played. And Jimmy would say, come over here and do this. I'd go do that and go back to my job.
Do you have any specific memories about that show and working with that cast?
All good memories. It was a very pleasant place to work. There was no hang-ups, no attitudes. Everybody wanted it to be wonderful, and we worked that way.
Let's talk a little bit about this. In October of 1980, you were taping a song for The Tonight Show, and you suffered a brain aneurysm. And can you talk a little bit about just that experience and how it affected everything?
My brain exploded while I was doing the show. My mother, the teachings of my mother, when it happened, I didn't know what was wrong with me. I wasn't sick. I didn't have a cold. I was fine. In fact, I was going on a vacation with my husband, who was my fiance at the time, and I was happy as I could be. And the aneurysm ruptured in my brain, and I said, "Into your hands I commit my spirit," and I was out. And they took me across the street to the hospital, and they looked at me and looked at my size and decided that it must be something about the size I was that had made it happen. They didn't know what it was, but whatever had happened, they thought it had to do with my size. And so they took my vital signs, and they were all good, and so they didn't know what was wrong with me. And so they sent me to another hospital. And they looked at me, and I was black and an entertainer, and they decided that it must be an overdose of drugs. And so they started looking for drug content in my system, and there were no drugs. And so I wasn't too fat, and I wasn't a junkie, so now nobody knew what was wrong with me. My son is a psychiatrist. He sent for my physician, who came immediately. And he said to them, I see her 3 times a year, she's not on drugs, and that's the size she is. And there must be something else we should be looking for. And so that night, they discovered that the aneurysm had ruptured. And the next morning, they sent me to another hospital, because this other hospital had the equipment necessary to deal with an aneurysm in my brain. And they then took x-rays and stuff and things, and after 2 weeks they sent me to London, Ontario, to Dr. Charles Drake. I had surgery, brain surgery, twice in 10 days, and 10 days after that I was doing a commercial for Campbell Soup.
Wow, so a quick recovery, it seems like.
I love you.
Free for a brain aneurysm.
You're just wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
All right, we're going to stop and take a break. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the guest starring roles that you had on television. And let's start with Love Boat.
Oh, that was wonderful because Carol Channing was there. Ethel Merman was there. It was a wonderfulness. Ethel Merman knew more jokes, limericks I think they're called, and she would strike out on them, and she would run them like a reel, and she would keep us laughing all the time. Carol Channing is a natural comedian. Just her existence is a comedian, and so she kept us laughing all the time. And then the dancer, Ann Miller, was there. And so I was surrounded by wonderful women, and it was a big production. The costumes were fantastic. It was wonderful to do, yes.
Did you work with Aaron Spelling at all during that time?
Well, he was in, let's clear this up for all times. The producer doesn't always come in. He comes in, he says hello to everybody as a group, and when it's over, he says thank you to everybody as a group. You're not necessarily going to be friends with him. You only would go to him if something needed to be fixed that nobody else in the place could fix. And so I met him, I talked with him. He was not the person who hired me. I'm sure that he had to give an okay to hiring me, but I was sent by an agency and hired by whoever was hiring at that time.
How about the A-Team with Mr. T?
That was good. That gave me an entirely different audience. Example, I was in Chicago on an elevator going to my room, and a lady and her daughter got on. The daughter must have been about 9 years old. And the mother said, "Oh, sweetheart, you have to know who this lady is." Said, "This is Della Reese. She is a great singer and a marvelous actress." And her daughter said, "No, Mom, that's Mr. T's mama. That's who that is." So it gave me, the young people, brand new audience. She didn't know about Della Reese, no singing, no nothing. She knew Mr. T's mama. That was her show that she watched, and so that was good.
How about Crazy Like a Fox with Jack Warden?
That was so fantastic. I learned so much from Jack Warden. Little humor. By that I mean a move, gesture, a mug, you know, kind of a face that you made. Not big faces, you know, eye movements. Jack had a lot of, he could say a lot with the way he just moved his eyes and moved them back, you know, little techniques like that. And it was a good atmosphere too. It was good. He was not impressed with himself. All that he had done had not left him impressed with himself. So he came to work every day, a new person, a new someone to be with, a new someone to work with. I enjoyed him very much.
How about 227?
Well, Marla was on 227. Marla's my friend. We come from the same town. We know each other forever and a month. And so that was like being at home.
How about Night Court?
Night Court was fun because of the lady who was on Night Court at the time. And I had not, she was a comedian, and I had not ever seen her before. And she kept me in stitches from hello every day. She was wonderful.
And MacGyver?
Well, he was really, the whoever wrote that script was really quite clever. That was fascinating. The things that they could take and put together that really did work. And some of them have used since then to remove spots and things. He knew stuff like that. And so every show, I was taking notes about, I could use this in my kitchen. I could put this because it was really good. He had a lot of technical intelligence. Mm-hmm.
How about the pilot that you did for ABC in '82 called It Takes Two?
That was with the lady who played the miracle worker.
Patty Duke.
Patty Duke. And she is intense, absolutely intense. And to see her come from her great dramatic attitude to this comedic attitude was wonderful. It was like she stepped out of one body and into another body, just that easily. And the cast was good, and we had a good time. We should have been on longer than we were. I have no idea what happened, but
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
One day they said that we were closing.
In your book, you talked a little bit about that this was a role that you hadn't been offered before. It was a role of a judge, and you hadn't been offered those types of roles in the past.
I had not. I had not been. A lot of things changed for me with Harlem Nights, and I mean a lot of things. They wanted the Reverend Dr. Coleman to rescind my license as a minister. All kind of things happened in my life because of Harlem Nights. But I had played the same role so many times. Sometimes I had a nurse's uniform on when I played it. Sometimes I was somebody's mama when I played it. Sometimes I was a police officer when I played it. But it was the same role. And my prayer was, I want a role that people will stop saying that I'm a singer who tries acting, but give me the credit for being able to carry on a role that's not necessarily me, to act. And up came Harlem Nights. And I went to read for it, and it immediately, Eddie said yes, but everybody on his crew said no, that's not it. So they looked at some other people. And Eddie asked me to come back, and he said yes, and they said no, and they looked at some other people. And finally, they asked me to come back, and Eddie said, I don't want you to read. I've heard all these other people, and this is your job if you want this job. And from that job, along with the flack that I got some roles that nobody ever thought to offer me before. I became a stagecoach driver in Young Riders. Nobody would have offered me that before Harlem Nights. I got other parts that had nothing to do with this nice, auntly-like, motherly-like figure that I had been playing for all those years.
And also, you talk a little bit in the book about, Eddie being responsible for the show that you were going to do with Red Fox.
He was responsible. He was responsible for it. And it came by so simply. We were at this long table, and on one end was a drape for the props, and on the other end was a drape for the props. And this young lady who was the prop master would come out and pass out fruit. We were eating fruit. Red never knew where he had peeled the fruit to, so we could never match it. So we had to start at the top every time, and he had to get a new orange every time. Because he didn't know. He did this orange, I peel it, I put it down, I don't know. And they got tired of telling him, just peel one piece, that's enough. We're not really taking a picture of the orange. Just peel a little bit so we see it. And then the next, he didn't do that. He just kept. So the lady would usually come out behind and stop at him first, give him his orange. Then she'd go and give out the other things that she had to give out. And then she would fade in the curtain on the other side where the rest of the props were. This particular time, she got caught on this side. And so sensibly, she started handing out the props where she was. And Red says, "Where's my orange?" And I said, "She's on the way with the orange." "You better bring the orange." I said, "She's on the way with the orange. She's coming with the orange." "What is her name?" I said, "Renita." He said, "Renews it, bring me the orange." Okay. I said, "Her name is not Renews it. Her name is Renita." He said, "Renita, renews it, what the difference does it make?" And I said, "Chartreuse, salmon pink, yellow, what difference does it make when your name is Red?" And we started this conversation back and forth. Now, Richard Pryor is sitting down at the end of the table, and he's signifying. He said, "Red, you let a woman talk to you like that? What kind of man are you, let a woman talk to you like that?" Well, now Red raises up, and he says something else, And so I'm right on him. I say, I don't remember what, but I said something else. Now Richard says, "Dell, he ain't your man. Don't let him talk to you like that. He ain't giving you no money. Don't let him talk to you like that." Red rises, and we have this. Everybody is standing around is cracking up because this is all extemporaneous, and we are going at each other, going back and forth. We're friends, so we can do this with each other. So Eddie just slides down the wall. He's just sitting on the floor laughing. He said, "Let's take a lunch break." And he went in the trailer, and he wrote The Royal Family.
Did he talk to you at that time about
He went in the
to
trailer and wrote The Royal Family. When it was ready, he handed me my part, and he handed Red his part.
So can you describe the premise of the show, of Royal Family?
Our children, our daughter especially, had grown up and moved out of town. And she had 3 children. We never did approve of the man she married. Him taking her across the country didn't make it any better. And now they are separated, and she has no place to go. And so she comes home and brings the 3 children. We have to deal with that. We have to deal with her problems of she's not sure whether she still loves him or not. And some days she's very sad about her marriage, and some days she's getting over her marriage. The children we have to adjust to. They're going to school. The boy is old enough to go into the early high school grades. The baby needs a sitter type daycare. That's what I'm trying to say. And so we have to deal with that, and we have to change our lives around to incorporate our family.
Okay. In your book, you talked a little bit about some behind-the-scenes tension between Red and one of the producers.
It was there. It was absolutely. It's that racial thing that you've been asking me about all day. This man wanted, as some people do, to present himself as some of my best friends are black. I know a lot about black people, and I've been with black people all my life, which is very offensive in its connotation. Very offensive. If you did and you like them, why do you have to pull that out? You don't come in and you say, I knew some Spanish people, I knew some Irish people, I knew some English. You don't do that. People are people. And so that friction ran between them. And he was always trying to tell Red how to be funny. That is so stupid for him to have approached that. And he approached it with, I'm one of the producers, and I can tell you how to be funny if I want to. And Red was saying, you don't even know funny, so you can't tell me something you don't even know. And that was the undercurrent all the time. He came in with things like, we had a thing with the baby, and he said, I think you should call her peanut shells. And Red said, that's rubbish. I'm not going to call the baby rubbish. You don't even eat the peanut shells. You throw that away. Well, my niece, we call her. He said, well, go home and call your niece that. I'm not calling this baby this. This particular day, that kind of thing is what I'm saying. There's always something like that. This particular day, Entertainment Tonight came to interview Red. And he's in a room with them. And they have set up, just like you've set up here today, they've only more elaborate. They've set up their cameras and things because they're running screen clips of Red from Sanford and Son. They got a whole thing there. And so we're rehearsing a scene, and all Red had to do was walk across the back of my chair. We're not shooting, we're rehearsing a scene. And of course, they sent someone to walk back. And this man says, where is Red? And I said, he's having an interview with Entertainment Tonight. I said, but he doesn't have any lines here. He just has to walk. If he's supposed to walk past, he should be in here to walk past. So he goes in there, stops their shooting, and brings Red out. And when Red gets out there and finds out all he has to do is walk across the back of this that anybody could have done, he becomes livid. And he falls. Well, he was always doing pratfalls. And I thought that's what he did. Everybody thought that's what he did. And he was laying on the floor, and I leaned down to him, and I put my hands on him. He said, get my wife, get my wife. Get my wife, I said, somebody get paramedics and somebody go get Mrs. Fox. And they went and got her. And they pronounced him dead. And they put him in the ambulance, and we all got in our cars and followed him to the hospital. And he came back and stayed for 4.5 hours. Now we're all sitting in the lobby of the hospital. And the doctor comes out and says, Mrs. Fox, we've done all that we can do, and your husband is gone. And standing this close were two of the producers, and they said, what are we going to do with this script? This script was written for Red and Della, so who are we going to get to? Who's going to replace? She's sitting right here. They just told her that her husband was dead. And I went crazy. I went absolutely insane on everybody. And got in my car and left. And I made up my mind in that car on the way home that I wasn't ever going to do television that way again, because if something happened to me and they treated my husband and my daughter that way, I'd have to come back. And once I go, I don't want to come back. And they never did they never did treat him with the respect that he should have been, should have had. He should have had a right out of the show, but instead they stuck Jackie in there. And she's a wonderful comedian, but that was not the time nor the place for her to be. They just reached out and got her and sat her in there. And he never got the treatment he needed. He was not phased out of it, like he didn't get an accident or didn't get sick or something. And so he was no longer in it. Just one day he was there and one day he wasn't.
You talked a little bit before in the book about that there was a show that was put together in memoriam, but
they wouldn't let it. They wouldn't let it show. And what happened? What really got to me about that part was, it was so full of love that everybody that came in felt that show, and the powers that be came in and said, "Oh, we can't do that. That almost made me cry." And it was cut, just like that. And what they put on was really ridiculous for the magnitude of the man that we were dealing with.
So you talked a little bit about, that you said, I will never do television that way again.
I did. I just told you that.
Yeah.
I said, I won't do it anymore. Because this is so callous. The people are so callous. I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want my daughter or my son or my husband to be treated that way. And I said, I'll get back on the road and sing that. I can do that. I know that. I can make a living. I don't have to I can do something other than this, was my attitude, yes.
So did you go right back in, because I know you've done some stuff, you did some stuff in the 90s, LA Law, Picket Fences. Did you go into that with that attitude? Or?
That's different. I did spots on there. I did segments of that. I said, what I was talking about is I would not tie up into a contract that was going to last for any length of time with this kind of people.
I see. Do you have any memorable moments from the shows I just said, LA Law, Picket Fences?
Picket Fence was wonderful. I got the organ of a pig. Oh, that was the beginning of them being able to transplant organs other than human organs. And we had a lot of doctors around explaining everything. And so aside from the script, it was an interesting place to be. Mm-hmm. And the attitude playing of that, there were so many facets. When they first told me that, I didn't put no pig in me. If you don't do this, we don't know how we'll keep you alive. I'm not ready to die. I don't want no pig in me. The part began to build. The attitudes of my part began to change, and I liked that.
In 1993, you played opposite Sherman Hemsley in 2 episodes of Designing Women.
Yes.
And can you talk a little bit about working with him?
Well, I know Sherman, for a long time, so it was not strange at all. But that was a bit part too. It was just for that. It was a wedding. That's what it was. Somebody was getting married, and it was the part. The first part was before the wedding, getting ready for the wedding, and the second script was the wedding. I think I was the minister or somebody in the. So it wasn't really a long engagement.
Okay, so let's start now talking about Touched by an Angel.
Yeah.
Which started in 1994. How were you first approached about doing the pilot?
My husband gives me a honeymoon every year. This will be my 29th honeymoon this year. And it was time for the honeymoon. I never know where the honeymoon is going to be. He will say to me, like, pack some jeans, or he'll say, pack something for going out to dinner. I don't know where I'm going out to dinner. And this was time for the honeymoon. And William Morris called me and offered me this part. And I said, I can't take it because it's time for my honeymoon. And he says, well, have you ever been to Carolina? It's a wonderful place. It's an old town. It's a sea town. The food is good. And then he quoted me this salary amount. And I said, well, no, it's good, but I'm going on a honeymoon, and I can't go. So he said, and you don't have to carry the show. You only have a couple of days' work, and there would be plenty of time for your honeymoon because there's this town around here and that town around there, and the food is so wonderful. And he quoted me this price again, which was really, really nice. So he did that about 3 times, and I said, well, let me call you back. And so I talked to my husband. I told him everything the man told me. I asked him, had he ever been to Carolina? And he said, yeah, but it's been so long ago. I said, but did you know that so-and-so, this particular place was the pirates used to be. Everything the man told me, I told him. And then after I told him all of that, I said, he offered me this price to do this. And I said, how about the honeymoon in Carolina? And then I said the price again. And he said, well, if you want to go to Carolina, it's all right with me. We'll go to Carolina. So I went, and we made this pilot that CBS spent $2.5 million on and hated it. And they should have, because it was unbelievable. Roma could only heal dogs and cats. She couldn't heal anything else, just dogs and cats. We had both been human beings before, and I had died from smoking, and so now I felt like I could smoke as much as I wanted to because I couldn't die from smoking anymore. I was angry with her because 100 years ago, God had given her to me on an assignment, and she had messed up the assignment, and I had to take the wrath of God for the assignment that she had messed up. And I had been waiting to get her back on my team so I could make her pay for what she did 100 years ago. And they looked at it and thank God they didn't like it because it was horrible. It really was horrible. And so they called Roma and I back to talk to us. And they told us that they couldn't go with that. And they introduced us to Martha Williamson. And she had been writing, I don't even remember, Give Me a Break or some kind of show like that. And so she was going to be the producer and the head writer. And so in this meeting, she said, she walked directly up to me and she said, this is going to be a story and we're going to use the word God. Can you live with that? And I just started laughing. I just really started laughing. And she says, well, why are you laughing? I said, because you haven't done your homework. If you've done your homework, you know how I feel about God. And so we had the meeting, and we started home. And I said to my husband, I don't want to do this. Because, and I told him, I said, because I'm back in the same situation I was in with Red. And I promised God and 2 other people I'm never going to do this again. And so he said, well, my husband said, well, I don't know, babe, I got a feeling about this, and I think you ought to talk to God about this. So I came home here. I went in the bedroom. I closed the door. I got up in the middle of my bed, and I started talking to the Father. I said, you know how I feel about this? And I appreciate this that you put in my path, but I'd rather you give me something else. I don't want to do this. You know how I am. You know, I'll go whatever. And as clearly as you hear me speaking to you, in my empty bedroom, the voice said to me, do this for me. And at that time, I thought I was smarter than God, so I tried to break it down so he would understand it. I went back into prayer, and I prayed anew, and I said, you know, what you don't understand is silence. There was no answer to it. And I understand it was stupid, but there was no answer to it. And I sat there, and I sat there, and I sat there. And when I stopped making these foolish sounds with my mouth and started to listen with my spirit, the voice repeated, do this for me. and you can retire if you want to in 10 years.
And did you believe that?
I did it for 9 years.
Can you talk a little bit about presenting Christianity on television? And
it was very difficult because there were people who were angry because we didn't use the word Jesus. There were people who were angry because we didn't use the word Mohammed or Buddha, or everybody wanted. So we decided that we would use the supremacy itself, God. No matter what name you got for him, God is a central spirit, not what you might consider sideline people. And so we worked from that point of view. But our reviews in the beginning was that it was too mushy, and it was too unreal, and it was too this and too that and too the other. It was never going to work. I got some clippings said, why didn't we go home and try to find us a show to do? And they were very nice with that. Jerome and I, we had great talent, and we needed something better than this and all of that. But the people needed the show, and they rallied around the show. And it's been off for 3 or 4 years. And when I walk the street today, people tell me, I wish that show was back on. That show really helped my life, or helped my cousin, or my sister was sick, or...
Was it difficult to be on location when you gotten used to shooting in LA? Because you shot the show in Salt Lake City.
Well, no, because it was a simple flight. See, we worked the 5 days. We didn't work weekends. So at the end of Friday night, I could come home. I've been pastoring a church for 25 years. And so at the end of Friday night, I could come home so that I could have the weekend to take care of the business of the church and to do the sermons and whatever else needed to be done on Sunday. And then either Sunday evening or first thing Monday morning, I could be there in an hour and 15 minutes.
What was the community reaction to in Salt Lake of you shooting?
Oh, they loved us. They loved us. I had a lot of people to tell me before I went there, be careful, because the Mormons have a thing for black people, and they'll do this. And nobody ever said anything out of the way to me. Nobody ever approached me about changing my faith. No, none of that. They treated me, and they have a work ethic that's just marvelous. Things happened, and this is the truth. I would go shopping when everything was gone. When there was nothing left, that's when I would go shopping. And so I would have 2 or 3 of those baskets full of stuff, because I wasn't going again till everything was gone. Because I worked from 6 in the morning to sometime 10, 11 o'clock at night. And I'd have these baskets full, and the young packagers would help me take the baskets out. And I would offer them a tip. And they say, no, this is my job. And I said, it wasn't your job to put all these things in the car. This is for you. And we would have the great argument about I shouldn't give him a tip. And I got a trunk full of stuff that he's brought out. You couldn't get that here and any place else I know of. And I wouldn't talk to him anymore. When they put in the last piece, I put the money in the pocket, closed the trunk, and got in the car. That's how I was able to, and they'd be standing there when I would leave going, but like, you don't understand, this is my job. I think that just impressed me so much.
As an actress, can you talk a little bit about how you would prepare for...
I study. I study the script. I study the words. I listen to what the words say. See, sometimes on the paper, it looks very good. But when you put it in your mouth, it's not anything that the average human being would understand that way. And there's a way to say that in a common everyday way so that people don't have to figure out what you're saying. So you have to go over it until it fits in your mouth, until it comes. What
was your working relationship like with Roma Downey?
She's my daughter. She became my daughter in those years. I'm the godmother to her child. I married her to her husband. I love her very much, and she feels the same way about me.
Do you keep in touch now?
Absolutely. I'm going to see her Wednesday.
When were you approached about singing the show's theme song?
From the beginning, yeah, from the beginning.
And music seemed to be a very integral part of the show.
Yeah.
Did you have any influence with Martha with that? Did you ever talk to her?
Well, yeah, well, we had the influence. I strike out the word influence. It was my voice, so I was going to sing what I was going to sing. It didn't take any influence for that. And sometimes, because of public domain, the songs that they would choose didn't make sense. Like one of them was, a little baby had just been born. And the baby had some kind of an ailment that she brought with her at birth. And I was supposed to rock the baby, and they had green sleeves for me to sing to the baby. Alas, my love, you have done me wrong. That's not a nursery rhyme. It's not. It's about a lady being identified as being a prostitute, and her costume is that she wears this dress with the green sleeves. So I had to say, no, I'm not singing this to the baby. The baby ain't done me wrong. And we came across a lot of songs like that. But music costs a lot to put into a play or a television show. And so you try to choose songs that they call public domain. There's not a great price for them, and they would choose those songs, and sometimes those songs had nothing to do with what we were doing. Mm-hmm. And so in that respect, yes, I had.
You wrote a little bit in your book about the grassroots campaign that sort of wanted to keep the show on the air, and you said that some of the guest stars from the first season took out an ad to help save the show.
Everybody that worked the show loved the show, and several people, like one lady had just lost her husband, and she had 3 children, and nobody planned this. But the script she was hired for, the lady she was playing had lost her husband and had 3 children. And so every word she said meant more to her than you could possibly believe, because she was really in this script telling her own story. And that was not the only time. Several times during the years, people came on and said, well, this is what I'm doing now, or this is how my life is going. And so they brought to the character an extra bit of talent from their own personal emotions, and they left feeling healed because they got a chance to say it and experience it out loud, and it was beneficial to everybody.
Can you talk a little bit about the addition of John Dye as a regular cast member?
Well, we had another young man who was the angel of death, and he did the first couple of shows, but he got an opportunity to have his own show. And so he quit Touched by an Angel, and unfortunately what was to be his own show never did pan out. And during that time they hired John Dye, and the angel of death's part changed a bit with John Dye. John did other things than just come to take the people home, where the first angel of death, that was his sole job, to come and get people and take them home.
And what was it like working with John?
John was wonderful. He did everything he could to help. He didn't get frustrated and dingy, and we got along just fine. It was a marvelous set. It was a marvelous place to work.
What do you think was the turning point for the show, going from nearly being canceled to being one of the top shows?
People. People need something to help them with their lives. In the show, we didn't tell you what to do. we said, did you ever think about it like this? So if you were distraught and you were at a place where you felt there was nothing else to do, we would make a suggestion. It's left up to you whether you do it or not. But did you ever think about it like this? It doesn't have to be that way. You can change your mind, change your life. You see? And it gave people at home, in the privacy of their homes, a chance to know that they too could change their minds and change their life. There was another way to do it. It wasn't the end of the world.
There's some other recurring characters that have popped up over the years. If you could just, talk a little bit about each one of them, just briefly. Paul Winfield played the angel Sam.
Yes.
And do you have a story about him?
You bring up people that I've known forever. I knew Paul. You see, when you have already had a relationship, a friendly relationship with somebody, it's not a stranger coming on to act with you. It's somebody you know. And whether you are dealing with the person's character or the little moves that people make or the little attitudes that they have, if you know that person, you have a deeper understanding of what that move means, what that look means. You understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So it made it good to work with him.
How about Cloris Leachman?
Cloris was in and out, and she's a real character. She was in and out, and we had a lot of visiting angels who were from different departments, and she was from one of those departments. I don't remember what her department was, but.
How about Bill Cosby as Phil?
Bill came at a time. Bill was supposed to come when his son was killed. And he said, I can't come now, but as soon as I can, I'll come. And as soon as he could, he did. And he was magnificent. And
he was in several episodes,
yes.
Correct? In 1996, there was an episode called Indigo Angel, and the show was about a blues and jazz club owner. There were several musicians who made appearances on the show. B.B. King, Al Jarreau. What was it like doing that episode?
Heaven, absolute heaven. Because when it wasn't rehearsal, it was jamming. But we couldn't just say we over here jamming. So we'd be over there playing. We'd be rehearsing. We knew all that stuff. We wanted to play and sing with each other. So I said, well, what time will you be through? Well, we have 3 more numbers to rehearse. We knew all 3 of those numbers, but we'd play them, and I'd sing. Al Jarreau would sing, and BB play, and, we just had a wonderful time.
The performing and singing on the show, was that something that you wanted to do more frequently? Did you and Martha discuss that?
It was good where it was. It wasn't about my singing. But my singing came in handy if we had something in a bar. Okay, that would give me a reason for being there. I would be the singer with the piano bar. Or if there was going to be some major event. I remember one time we did about black baseball players. And before the game started, I sang the Star-Spangled Banner. And that was very apropos. It was right for that. I should have done that. There were a lot of places where children needed to be put to sleep or games needed to be played with children that my singing came in to be. Weddings, if we did something about a wedding, I could sing. So it was apropos for what we were doing.
The show tackled some pretty serious issues, immigration, illnesses like Down syndrome, ALS, Alzheimer's. Do you think the show handled the issues appropriately?
I think so. Research for that show was unbelievable. They found out everything about everything. We had a marvelous staff to do that. And everything was handled with respect. For an example, we had some Down syndrome actors who did very good work, and we had them on whenever that situation came up or was even a side issue, we would have them on to handle that. We did things, Operation Smile, for an example. We brought children over from Peru and had them on the show so that we could raise money for Operation Smile, and the children could have their faces fixed so they could have a decent life. We did a lot of good work.
How about the episode with Tess having Alzheimer's?
Well, that was something.
Did you do a lot of your own research for that?
No, I just I knew people who had been there and had that happen to them. And so I drew from what I knew.
When Roma Downey was pregnant with her daughter, how did the show handle that?
We hid it, boxes, packages, garden tools, flower baskets, something in front of her, standing looking over something, counters.
You received the Image Award for Outstanding Actress in a Drama Series 6 years in a row.
Yes.
For that show.
Yes.
What was that?
That was
What's that
thrilling.
like to win that award?
I hadn't had awards before. I hadn't had that kind of recognition before, so it was wonderful.
You also received several Emmy and Golden Globe nominations. How did it feel to be nominated for an Emmy?
All of that was good. I had worked forever for a salary. I had not worked. I didn't come into this trying to get a Grammy. I started because I was hungry, as I told you earlier, and this made me a living. And so what I was after was a decent living. When I had my child, I was interested in my child having a decent living. So I was a working singer. I was a working actress. I never looked for an award. So when the awards came, and they all came in that show, I was in hog heaven.
In October of 1997, you had held a news conference about a salary dispute that you had with CBS. Can you talk a little bit about the dispute?
They wanted to give everybody else a raise, and they didn't want to give me a raise, and I couldn't accept that. Just that simple.
And how was that settled?
They gave me my money.
The 100th episode of the show, they did a special episode. It's called Psalm 151.
Mm-hmm.
And Winona Judd was in it, Celine Dion.
Yes.
What do you remember about shooting that?
I remember Miss Judd, the way they had her feeling that she couldn't do that. And being a singer, I knew she had already done it. And so I would steal off, and her sister was with her, and she, I think, was her acting coach, and she could tell her how to do it, but she didn't feel, she's always been an actress, so she didn't feel transforming yourself from a singer to an actress. I felt that, so I was able to talk to her, and I think I was of some help to her, and she gave a marvelous performance.
Did you ever?
Celine Dion was not there. She was the dream. That was another show. She was the dream of a little girl, and they arranged to take this little girl to see Celine when she was in Vegas or someplace like that. They weren't a part of. Winona's show was about this little boy who knew he was going to die, and he had a list of 10 things that had to be done before he could die in peace. And one of them was that his mother, Winona, should finish a song that she had started to write and she never could finish. And that song was the 151st Psalm. And so that was all about him and how he was holding her together while he got ready to make his transition.
Did you ever find that you got emotionally caught up in episodes like that?
Yeah, you got caught up in it. Unless you were dead, you had to feel it. Because it was the show was about feeling stuff. going through changes and feeling stuff. So you had to be dead not to be aware of what was going on, and the performances were so good.
In 1995, it was season 5, and the show did an episode called Black Like Monica. And Monica had to face racial prejudice, and the episode had Rosa Parks in it. And
Yes.
you actually got to work with
Oh,
Rosa
absolutely.
Parks?
But the episode was so interesting because Roma doesn't have a prejudice bone in her body, not one. And for her to do that was so hard, for her to get that feeling, that anger, that fear, that none of that was her. And she just really toed the mark to get to that. She had to go through a lot of makeup troubles, and she had to say a lot of things that she never would have said as a human being, and it was difficult. And I think she handled it marvelously.
So what was it like to meet Rosa Parks?
She was a gracious lady, but that was not the first time I had met Miss Parks. But she was a gracious lady. She was in her waning years at the time, and we had to use her very carefully so that we would catch her in times when she had the energy to do that and see that she was comfortable at all times. But she was a marvelous woman.
What kind of feedback do you remember getting from the network and from viewers on that particular episode?
I don't know that any particular, well, I do, that's not true, Dale. I don't know that many single episodes were what the people brought to me, the fans, I mean. They always spoke about it in the generalness of the shows helped them. They never helped the person who was talking to me. It helped her sister or her cousin or her brother-in-law. It always helps somebody else, you know what I'm saying? But they didn't come about. Only one time, I remember this time because of the way it happened. I'm on a plane. I've worked all week. My call this morning was 6 o'clock, and I'm on a 10:15 plane. I have worked all day coming home. And all I want to do is take a little nap for this hour and 15 minutes, so when I see my husband, I'll be friendly and loving, because I'm tired and I'm mad and I'm all those things. So I want to take a little nap now. And I'm sitting on the last seat in first class before you step into coach. And they've allowed me to get on, and I got my pillow and my blanket around me, and I'm stretched out in my seat, and I'm going to sleep. And this lady who is getting on sees me, and she stops, and she says, "I have to tell you, you saved my life." And I said, "Oh," and she must have somehow sensed that I didn't, I wasn't impressed with what she said. And she said, She said, "I have to tell you this. You saved my life. My husband was 26 years old. Wasn't nothing wrong with him. He just died." Said, "I have 2 children. I didn't know what to tell my children because I didn't know what to tell myself. I don't know," and they all said this, "I don't know how I happened to be in the living room, and that station was on. And you was doing a show about a man who was dying, and his family was standing around his bed. And the man was so happy to be going home. And my husband, the more I looked at him, the more he reminded me of my husband." And she said, "He was an old man. My husband was only 26 years old. But his comfort in going home made me know that my husband was comfortable going home. And I was able to talk to my children and tell them that Daddy's fine. He went on a trip he wanted to go on, and we'll see him again someday." Now, I'm just telling you now, it's giving me thrills. The honesty of this woman, the depth of what she felt, and to think that we had done a television show that had saved her from the depression of her husband dying was...
In 2001, CBS decided to move the show from the Sunday night slot that it had always been in to Saturday nights. Do you think that move had anything to do with...
They moved, they didn't know what to do with it. We started off on Wednesday night when we started. They moved it from Wednesday night to Tuesday night. They didn't put any publicity whatsoever, but the people got on the phone and called each other and said, it's on Tuesday now. And the calls to all their friends, it's on Tuesday night. It's on Tuesday night. It's on such a channel on Tuesday night. Then they changed it to Saturday night. Then the people got on the phone and called their friends and said, it's on Saturday night now. And finally, we ended up on Sunday night.
Can you talk a little bit about Valerie Bertinelli joining the show in 2001?
It was a good time for her to join the show because she was in dire straits about her relationship with her husband. And it was a place that she could come and give vent. And it was a place where people were loving and gracious to her. And she needed those surroundings at that time.
How do you think that her character changed the show?
I don't. In fact, with no disrespect to her whatsoever, I saw no need for that part. I think that she was hired because somebody said, well, it's been the same too long and you need a new face in there. And she was chosen to be the new face.
Do you feel that your role on the show changed at all in the last few years?
No, I don't think so. No, I was there to do what I did, and I did that all the while I was there.
So the show ended in 2003, as we talked about. Did you know going into the 9th season that was going to be the end?
Yes, they called us and had a meeting. And the first thing they wanted us to do was to take a 10% cut in our salaries, which I didn't want to give 10% to CBS. I felt like CBS had enough money already. And so then came the threat that if we didn't do that, that would be our last season. And I said, well, if it's over, it's over. I happen to know that the only thing permanent is God. Everything else is transient anyway.
Did that come from ratings slipping, or what was their
reasoning?
No,
I don't know. I really don't know. In television, it's the trend, and we were never in the trend. You see, we were always outsiders. And the trend was changing from this to that, and we were consistent, ever the same. And I really cannot tell you to this moment why that was, but the reason they gave was that the show was too expensive and they had to make cutbacks.
Were there any stories, or one particular story that you would have liked to have seen the show tell that they didn't?
No, because all I had to do was say, what about? I wrote a couple of things for the show.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, one of them was wonderful. I did a movie, Somebody's Wish. I can't remember what the name of it was, and it was done at a senior citizen's home. And you think of a senior citizen's home as people sitting around, not doing anything, kind of rocking a little bit, being old. This was nothing like that. They were so busy with stuff they were doing, and the couples were in love like they were 20 years old. The family would come, and the happiness was there. I have a painting upstairs I bought from one of these ladies who was an excellent artist. And she had her room filled with pictures, and she was painting. Everybody was living there. Nobody went there to die. Everybody was living there. I was so impressed by it that I had to write it down, and so I did. And I gave it to Martha, and we did it.
Is there anything that you wanted Tess to do that she didn't get a chance to do?
Oh, no, I did what...
You did everything?
It was free form for me. The words were there. And being a lyricist, I appreciated the words. And I had no problem saying, I could say this better, And this would sound better if I said it like this. I would not take it out of context, but I would not necessarily use the written word. I would use the word that, and we all wanted it to work. So whatever you brought that made sense was acceptable.
I'm just going to name a few names. If you can just give a description or an anecdote for some of the other guest stars. James Earl Jones.
Oh, I was enamored of James Earl Jones. Who isn't enamored of James Earl Jones? That dignity, that wonderful depth of voice, and we had lunch together, he and I. It was a really nice experience.
How about Angela Lansbury?
Oh, she's my favorite. I watch her today. She is one of my favorite shows. In the morning with my coffee, I watch her. And when she came to do the show, I was like a teenager. I was so happy to be with her. And we had scenes together which thrilled me deeply. And we had, while we were waiting to do what we were doing, we had friendly conversations, and I loved being with her. Just loved being with her.
How about Natalie Cole?
Natalie I knew as a child. And as I told you earlier, I was in love with her father, and so I had bounced her around as a child, and she remembered that, and we had good memories about that.
How about Ozzie Davis and Ruby Dee?
Ozzie was my good friend, and so is Ruby my good friend, so it was a pleasure to have them there.
You were talking about Muhammad Ali, having a picture
It
of him.
was wonderful because it was during the time when he was having the most trouble speaking. And he came because this young boy wanted to be a fighter, but he wasn't training for the ring. He was just fighting everybody else. And the point was to make this boy understand that a champion chooses to fight in the ring. He doesn't choose to fight everybody he knows. And Muhammad, though he could not speak well, his ambiance, his being there, his grace and structure was marvelous for the child. Child never forget it.
So can you talk a little bit about your life and career now and how important it is for you to keep working?
I have to work. I need to work. I get bored too quickly. So I'm writing, I'm pastoring a church. They say there are no parts for women like me, so I'm writing a couple of scripts to show that there are parts for women like me, my age and all. And I'm living at a wonderful place. I can still do whatever I want to, but I don't have to do anything anymore, you know? And I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about it's not required. I made my bones. I got my trophies. I put my work on the line. People accepted it. So if I want to do something, I can. If I don't have to. And I love it. 76 is good. I can hardly wait for 77, which is 6th of July.
Well, happy birthday.
Thank you very much.
So how have you used your celebrity to help with causes over the years?
Well, just a couple of weeks ago, I had a concert called Della Reese Presents. And what I presented was a young lady that we found singing on the street. She's 11 years old. Her name is Camilla Thomas. And I presented her. And I presented a marvelous young lady named Kim Yarborough, who is a member of my choir, but is sort of a mixture of Chaka Khan and Streisand. She has the range of Streisand and the gutturalness of Chaka Khan. I presented my choir, and we had a marvelous evening, and the money went to benefit my church. I worked for Faith in Action, which is a group that takes care of people so that they're able to stay in their homes and have someone come and see about helping them. I donate to wherever I can donate. I like to take care of the animals, and so I send money to that, and cancer, breast cancer, and whenever they call me, whoever calls me, I go and do what I can do.
In 2002, when you were on Larry King Live, you talked about having type 2 diabetes. And what made you decide to come forward on that show at that time?
Well, I don't like for people to be frightened, you see. And you have in you everything you need to defend yourself from whatever attacks you. Now, whether you know it or not, or use it or not, does not change that you have it inside of you. I know for sure, you don't have to die because somebody else tells you you have to die. You don't have to die because your brain explodes. You don't have to die because you walk through a plate glass window and lose 7 pints of blood and don't have but 9. It has to do with the inner you. And you can fight off whatever is attacking your body. And type 2 diabetes is attacking my body. So I got some information. Information is power. And I've learned for 5 years now, I have contained it. I have lived wonderfully well. I have enjoyed my life, and I know how to work with it, how to use the equipment necessary, how to eat and not feel like I'm starving, the foods to choose. I've learned those things, and it has kept me going at the same wonderful pace I've always been going. And I wanted to tell people what I just told you.
In 1987, you became an ordained minister. What made you choose that path?
My brain exploded. And I wanted people to know, you don't have to die because your brain explodes. You have in you everything you need to heal yourself from whatever it is that's bothering you. And when I got up, I had so many experiences there. I've always been a Christian. My mother's house required you to be a Christian. But so many things happened there. Like, let me tell you. Okay, I'm in this 3rd hospital, and I have this doctor who is the most negative person to have ever studied medicine in existence, okay? So he comes in my room every day and tells me why I have to die, and he has statistics, 4 out of 7 and 6 out of 9 and all of that. And he tells me one day that I'm going to have an arteriogram. I never heard this word before, ever. And then he tells me that what it is they're going to run a tube from my groin to my brain so that they can inject a dye so they can see exactly where this rupture is, so that when they open my scalp, they can go directly to the problem. And then he tells me, the only problem is we have to find somebody who knows how to do this. Well, I said, you mean to tell me you want to run something all the way through my body and you don't know the route? I told Frank, I said, get this out of my room right away. Don't let him come back in. My son is saying, Mama, this is the best in the West. I said, I don't care. I don't want him. Don't let him touch me. Don't let him touch me ever. Get him out of my room. So I don't eat meat, and so my husband went across the street to get me some vegetables from an Oriental store, shop, restaurant. And so in this room, alone, I say this prayer. I say, Father, I don't understand the language, so I don't know how to make a decision. You'll have to help me make a decision. And the door opens to my room, and this man comes in operation garb, the green suit and the mask laying down and a little cap and the shoes on. And he says to me, may I come in? And I said, yeah, I thought he was a fan. I said, yes, come on in. He said, I was passing this room and something told me that I should come in because sometimes the patients don't understand the language. And I want you to know that I know the route. And if you don't get me, you'll get the man that taught me everything I know. But he didn't teach me everything he knows. So either way, you're in good hands. And I just wanted to stop by and tell you that. I went. I don't know what happened. I never felt it. He said to me, he says, all we need for you to do is be still. Can you be still? My favorite Bible verse is, be still and know that I am God. I said, you watch me be still. They took me down there. Whatever they did, I don't know. I felt nothing, no pain, no nothing, whatever. So when I got up, I wanted to run and tell everybody everything. Listen, this is what happened to me. This can happen to you too, you see. So I went to school. and I studied for 4 years with Reverend Dr. Johnny Coleman, and then I was going to teach. But then I had these two people in my class. One man had terminal cancer, and he and his wife had been married for like 35 years, and they had always been sweethearts and lovers. But now he was angry with her. And she came to the classes, and so she brought him to the classes. And he came in with, I don't want to hear all of this. This ain't going to help me at all. They done said I'm going to die, and I know I'm going to die. But class after class, the truth, which you can't avoid, got to him. And he began to relax, and they became lovers again. And he began to treat her royally again. And eventually, about 6 months after he came, he died of cancer. And she asked me, would I do the services for him? And so he was a wonderful man. The people were crying and everything. And so I did the service, and the people calmed down. And I have this poem that says, we're standing on this shore looking at the ship leaving, and we're saying goodbye. But on the other shore, there are people saying, oh, look, here the ship comes. It's wonderful. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And the people just calmed down. And the minister got up and said, well, all those pretty words she giving you, but all y'all going to die sometime. Have you made your peace with God? Because well, you're going to be laying right here one day. You're going to be laying right here one day. And this is no time for no pretty words. This is time. And the people now are crying again, you understand? The lady gets so angry that she asked the minister not to come to the cemetery. And she asked me, would I go to the cemetery and say the final, well, I never buried nobody before. I don't know how to bury nobody. But he's laying there, and she's ready to go out there, and I don't know how to do this. So I go and I read the Bible, and I say the words and all of that. But when I come home, I call Reverend Coleman. I said, you got to tell me what to do because I got to go back to the cemetery. She said, for what? I said, I buried somebody, and I don't know nothing about burying nobody. I don't know if I've said the right things or I've done the right things or whatever be the case. And so she told me, I went back and I straightened it up and straightened it out and all of that. But it made me know that I needed to go deeper than to teach. I needed to have a place where I could teach and preach and teach the Bible mostly and the benefits of the Bible. So I went back to school and got my license as a minister.
Through the interview, you've mentioned your husband, Franklin, that several times.
Yeah.
And you said you're going to be celebrating your 29th honeymoon.
Well, my 29th. His is only 25.
And when did you marry?
We were legally married 25 years ago, but I was married to him 4 years before we were legally married. You see, when I had prayed for him, I didn't pray for him because I didn't know about him, but I had prayed for somebody that had as much love in them as I have in me, and that we could share that love and we could become one. And he came, so I knew it was him, but he had some other issues. And he didn't know it was me. God told me, but he didn't tell him. So I had to hold on to the love for 4 years until he got himself together and came on in out the rain.
And he's also your manager, correct?
Yes.
And so how, over the years, have you balanced the professional relationship with the personal relationship?
They don't have to balance. I'm his wife over here. That's one relationship. And I'm his client over here. That's another relationship. One has nothing to do with the other. I have him as my manager because he's a good businessman, not because he's my husband. And I have him as my husband because he's wonderful, not because he's a good businessman.
So over the years, how have you handled working and raising a family? You talked about that.
Oh, it's been good. It's been good. I planned. My daughter I kept with me until she had to go to school. I had a tutor with her all that time. That was before they were allowing private teaching at home. You had to go, the law said you had to go to school. So I kept her with me all of that time. And then from that time on, I made arrangements so I was gone just long enough to make the money to pay the bills. If I was gone any longer than that, I would send for her and the nanny and the teacher, and they would come and be with me. So it worked out. It worked out fine.
How do you feel that your personality comes across to audiences?
It must be good. Listen, I started at 6 and I'm 76 and they still come to see me. I'm going to accept that as they like me. I'm going to take that to be they like me a lot, in fact.
What do you think that the television industry today is still lacking as far as minorities and women?
Just that, minorities and women. They still have, not as much as they used to have, when we give them credit. They have this picture that all black people are alike, and all Irish people are alike, and all Indians are alike. And that's not true. We're all have some of everybody in us, you see, and they don't recognize that. So they keep on putting on shows from an ethnic point of view rather than from a human point of view. But they're a lot better, let me say it out loud, they're a lot better than they used to be.
What do you think has been your proudest achievement in your career?
In my career, I don't know. All of it was good to me. I don't know if there's one thing. I was not an overnight sensation. I didn't have a million seller immediately. I didn't, mine was a everyday working. I'm a working actress, a working singer. So I don't know about any particular thing that, no, I don't know of any.
Any regrets?
Oh, of course. But I appreciate the regrets because I learned. You see, from each thing that you learn, failure can be a wonderful thing because you learn never to do it that way again. You see, so by failing, if you're paying attention and you'll be honest with yourself, failing can elevate you to a better understanding. So yes, there are a lot of things I could have done a different way. But in the end, I like me. And all of those things that I went through, whether I handled them well or not, made me the human being I am right now. And I like me right now, so it's all right.
Would you say that you had any one particular mentor through your life?
Oh, absolutely. Her name was Ernestine Runless. I was 15 years old, 17 years old, and my mother died. And I was raised in the slums. That was before the ghetto. And I could have been, my choices were to be a prostitute, a thief, or a murderer. That's what was available to me. And she reached out and said, no, they're not going to get you, and picked me up and took me in and saved my life.
Do you feel that you've mentored anyone?
I hope so. Goodness, I hope so. I have so much to give back. I hope I have.
And how would you like to be remembered?
Remembered. That's sufficient. To be remembered is sufficient.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we're done.
Okay.
You have watched the entire collection of Della Reese. She has spoken on Touring with Mahalia Jackson, Nat King Cole, guest appearancing on The Love Boat, as well as other shows such as The Sanford & Son with Rare Fox, The Mod Squad, as well as Touched by an Angel. Let me know what do you think about this video in the comments. Let's have a discussion.